Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here in the reading room. We haven't had a program in the reading room in a few years, so this is quite special. And it's a lovely afternoon, and I'm really glad to be hosting this poetry event with 5 incredible poets. And I also heard that they're not just poets, they do all kinds of stuff. So that's pretty impressive. We're also recording this, so if anyone you know who isn't able to be here wants to see this, they can watch it later. And we also have about 20 other people who are here virtually, so you can imagine them in the room with us as well. And yeah, without further ado, I'll welcome Lucinda up to start us off, and can't wait. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Lucinda Zeising. So nice to see you all on this gorgeous evening. And I am so lucky to be in a feast of poets, with a feast of poets. There's been an event that for the last couple of years where the Page Gallery and the Poets Corner collaborate with each other. And the Page Gallery puts on an exhibition, and there's a call to poets to write ekphrastic poems to the works of art in this show. This piece is called Sea Heart, and the artist is Hannah Burrows. And I wrote a poem to Sea Heart, which she chose. And so I was the lucky one to read and represent this piece of artwork. So I'm going to read it to you. Sea Heart, swaying in cool brine, way out above our heads in the littoral zone. Wisps of rubbery rockweed weave shelter for the herring, the periwinkles, the eiders. Your alchemy purifying an ocean's water. Your chemistry nourishing our bodies. Floating in me so lightly at first, a silver eel rolling in amniotic fluid. I see your profile at 20 weeks, so vulnerable and serene. Your eyes shut. Your tiny fists clutched to your chest, a black and white portrait of the beloved growing inside me. Sea Heart, with a cowlick of ultramarine, you awaken our longing for blue. Kandinsky said, the more blue you become, the more you call us towards the infinite. I'm looking through transparent chambers to a rose dawn of the unknown. Sea Heart, I know your place of origin. We are the same. I too once breathed underwater. So this next poem I wrote last winter, when I took a train trip to Paris from London. And I had heard about this refugee camp that was in Calais because there was a theater piece called The Jungle that was very popular, and it came to New York. And from that jungle story came about a 14-foot tall puppet called Little Amal, who walked from Syria to Britain last summer, really as the ambassador for refugees, eliciting a welcome in our hearts for her and for refugees. So at the end of the train trip in Paris, I too found myself changed. Tunnels. I'm above ground, standing in the taxi line at the Gare du Nord. The young woman ahead of me is fluent in French. Marais, she affirms. I know it's the place to be on a Saturday night. Not been in Paris since I was 16. I remember the warm seat on the back of Jerome's motorcycle, snaking through the streets of Paris, charging out to the Bois de Boulogne, slanting into corners, squeezing, smelling sweet cedars and the ginkgos. I was wearing the peach corduroy sailor pants I wish I still had. The line's almost to the taxi stand. She adjusts her tiny silk scarf, so confidently French. I'm practicing the hotel address. Hotel Ami, 16e Rue de General Barret. My thinning lips move in silence. The pronunciation of Barret, my phone says, is close to beurre, the creamy French word for butter. I'll froth up Barret in my mouth and pass it on to the cab driver, so nonchalant through plexiglass. I've arrived from London in 2 hours, disappearing into tunnels, not knowing which one would bullet down into the English Channel. Until 17 minutes later, we surface into Monet's light on wind turbines and rows of poplars edging a field. I missed Calais. I was being served a croque-monsieur, the port where refugees hope to be stowaway in a lorry, ferry, or a train. I don't know a passing where I've risked my life, always a passport to protect me, but not from the ache of going into a tunnel and coming out blanched in the late afternoon light at the age of 72. This next one, well, what I want to say is poems. I used to write a lot of postcards to people. And I think that poems really are a postcard from the heart. If you really dare to go in there and send them. And I wrote this morning because I had to, and we'll see how I did. 88. On Valentine's, Rio turned 14. That's 88 in a yellow lab's life. The same numbers of keys on a piano, the same number of years my father had before I found him lying face down on the couch. I asked my friend, who's put many a hunting dog down, how do you know it's time? It's something in their eyes. They look beyond you. It's always a mistake to wait too long. Rio was born in Argentina, picked from a photo of black and yellow puppies, the one with soulful eyes, rimmed with a black eyeliner stick. He traveled to New York from Buenos Aires. My husband, Des, put a collar of gold stars around his neck, then drove him to Maine to be with us. We were all his. He'd let us know. When he hadn't seen someone for a while, he'd muckle his soft mouth onto our wrists, walking us in circles. By then, the kids were drifting off, 2 teenagers and 2 in their 20s. He made them know they belonged. Everyone feels irresistible happiness around Rio. The touch of his velvet ears, the snuzzle of his cool nose. He has a body that fits into any part of a boat. Ballast in the bow of a canoe, smelling the trout Des is just dreaming about. Recently, I've watched age blanket him in hydraulic measure. Like a folding table, his back legs give way now. 88. There were no more years for my father. If you add more keys to the piano, the human ear can't hear the octaves. I'm watching you out the glass door, lying in pine needles. Yellow fur moving up and down with your breath. We know it's time to let you go now.
Hi, I'm Paul Caponigro. I've just returned from my 13th voyage to Antarctica, and I'm going to read you some of the poems I've been writing about Antarctica. Some are waking and some are dreaming. I remember recently my father expressing the desire to go to Antarctica, and at 90, probably not going to make that journey with me. And I remember him asking me, so what is it about this magical place? Those are my words. What is it about this place that keeps you coming back? And there's this long pause, and you keep looking for the words. And so these are a few of the words that I've found. I'm still looking for the words. It's pretty hard to nail down the largest freshwater body on the planet is a frozen desert underneath miles, literally miles, 15,000 feet of ice. There are volcanoes and lakes bigger than Michigan or Huron. Oh, and the largest land mammal, this is a recent tidbit. My wife already got to come with me this trip, and on this trip, I collected another tidbit. The largest land animal is a tardigrade. You need a microscope to be able to see it. So it's okay if I'm still a little lost for words, but I'm finding some of them and I'm going to share some of them with you tonight. This one's called Voyage to the Bottom of the World. Blinded. In some dark seasons, the sun never rises, lost to night's hunger, swallowing all. Color in sightless shadows while temperatures careen past rigidity into stasis. An animation suspended into an accrued indefiniteness. And on the other side of the year, there's nothing but light, while the orb never sets, repeatedly burning horizons, caressed by blinding arcs, blazes rendering everything seen translucent, shifting conglomerated constellations of ice. Nevertheless, whether I can see them or not, the stars still whirl. Wailing, wind blows waterfalls back up the mountains they descend, hurls ice aerial into whirly dances sideways, then spins sea into gyrating spouts, gathers surface ice, flat sails in its irresistible current despite much thicker flows below, tips and turns over great masses, dragging underwater into breath. Nothing is left standing. Space is rearranged until gusts are gone unseen, unimaginably calm, returns relentless. Waiting. Great Lake slumbering sightless inside the world's largest body of fresh water, frozen now, melting slowly, growing ocean. So the continental crust rebounds, sounding echoes of underwater earthquakes, tsunamis, mere ripples, rebounding once they cascade on remote shores. But the deepest currents are changing heaven's weather, is awash in it. Receding, gargantuan grinding retreats reveal scarred mountains once, now gravel, while ice shelves shear and fracture at the front. No longer landed, their stirring melange drifts apart, without a clearly defined flow, so soon succumbs, becoming one with oceans which continue to drown more and more. Never ask me if I tire of it, returning for yet another season of summer ice with sunsets that last hours and even days when it doesn't. Still, if it does, it leaves an absence of true night, holding too few stars in unquenchable light before it rises. An abundance of whale songs will haunt my dreams if I dare shut my eyes. Despite my fear of not remembering, well, I'm all birds inside for it. It feels like it's a dreamland. It feels like another planet. So you're never really sure whether you're waking or dreaming. And I know that when I go down there, I have lots of dreams. So I have to keep my iPhone close to my bedside table and jot some of them down. And I feel like the dream experience is just as much an experience of the place as the waking experience, if you can just remember them. This Antarctic dreams. Breath dream. The southern ice sheet breathes its annual rounds of seasons, in 3 times smaller, out 3 times bigger. I start breathing with it, or it breathes me. Inhalation, exhalation, each cycle respired a year, 10,000 breaths in one night. I wake up so much older. The world is new again. Galaxy's dream. Strange snow swirling in every direction, even back up and inside. Every snowflake is a galaxy. My body becomes a parallel universe. Star's dream. Amid shattered fields of ice, I spot a constellation and realize it plots the outline of my body. But not long after, I trace this strange mirror, my mind. Currents tear into new points, implying lines, yet promising no new shapes. Jonah dream. Spreading shoals of teeth sliding along a tongue of tongue. I find myself in the bellies of a whale, swirling in shrimp and fish, resisting the claws and suckers of swallowed squid, gasping fright, mammal inside a mammal, dying to be rebirthed, wondering if I'll drown, suffocate, or be crushed, diving deeper than a body has a right to be. The pressure. Fire dream. In the middle of the night, the fire alarm goes off. Too late. Everything is burning. It's the worst thing that can happen at sea. No boat, no float. But no one is worried, so no one is hurt. Everyone enjoys being on fire. Their light can be seen over the horizon. The last one really speaks to all of my work and the profound confirmation that Antarctica gives me that it's all connected. We're all connected. Here's this white desert at the bottom of the earth, driving currents, changing climate and weather. It touches every other part of the globe, even though it seems like another world. This one's called Landscapes Within Landscapes, the title of my current exhibition down at Wilkes University. Trying to see the land, I see myself. Where one place starts and another ends, it's impossible to tell. Islands are also mountains in the sea. Oceans are many and one simultaneously. There's the space moved through and the one who moves through it. So lets it move through them. The body is already porous and pervious, eating, drinking, breathing, a place within a place. What becomes more permeable is the heart and the mind. How many ways can the self open itself into its greater self? Almost read those for the festival. I decided on 3 others. Come to the festival on the 20th, and I'll continue this.
Hello, and thanks for being here. My name is Maya Stein, and I live in Northport, and I'm a relatively newcomer to Maine. I've been here for 3 years. I think I have to be here for 35 or 40 more, maybe. But this is how long it's been. If you really knew me, you would know that I used to play with dust bunnies as a kid. I thought they were remarkable animated worlds, and my parents would often find me behind the door arranging the dust. One of my prized possessions, if you really knew me, you'd know that one of my prized possessions is my pink report card from 2nd grade. That's a bit of foreshadowing. It's going to come later in a poem. And if you really knew me, you would know that I used to want to be a long jumper. I was fascinated by Carl Lewis at the 1994 Olympics or 1984 Olympics. And I wanted to be a long jumper, but I did not become a long jumper. I became a writer. And here are some poems for you. I'm going to read a couple of short poems. I keep a short form poetry practice called 10-Line Tuesday. And I write a 10-line poem every Tuesday. It's just like what it sounds. And so I'll read a couple of those and then another one. I've been keeping this practice for 18 years. This is called Apricot. I made a new friend this week. I liked the feeling of that, of making something. There was an edge to push against, but an unexpected giddiness on the other side. I ordered a scone to go with my coffee. We sat on tall stools in front of a large window, filling in certain gaps. The crumbs gathered in an uneven circle as I ate and we talked. We were starting from a kind of scratch. We were loose leaf pages perforated from an old notebook. We were dominoes tilting in certain momentum. We were trees swaying in a way that looks like waving. We were introducing ourselves. We were an act of assembly. We were a detour. We were mattering to each other for a little while on a weekday morning in the diffuse light of winter. I was wearing shoes the color of ballpark mustard. There were flecks of dried apricot in the scone, like tiny suns. Sometimes I need poetry to connect the unconnectable dots. This is a poem that perhaps speaks to that. It's called Troubleshooting. Trust me, I'd like to destroy every single gun in this country. I imagine a crucible the size of a suburban backyard and a fireman's brigade of handoffs until the final pitch into a glowing molten mass and the tilting back of thousands of cups of pale lemonade and a bake sale table where everything is free and turns everyone's fingers sticky with toffee and chocolate. Instead, I'm watching Ray drill a perfectly round hole into our picnic table to fit the pole of a new teal-colored umbrella, because even though he was here to fix the leak in the upstairs shower, he has a few minutes to spare and a tool I do not have to do the job myself. However large my ambitions, there are places I can't reach, hairs in the pipes I can't see, bolts too stiff to turn. When Ray leaves, I fan the umbrella out as far as it goes and sit in the shade, wondering what to do with my hands. I have a number of poetry practices. One of them is to actually invite other people to contribute lines to a collaborative poem that I kind of assembled together, sort of like stitch work. And I sort of pose these, I call them collaborative poetry throwdowns. And I pose a challenge on social media, and I offer a line or something to respond to. And so I was asking for good news headlines, and they could be made up. So many of these are made up. You decide which ones you think are true. Maybe it doesn't matter. This poem is called "Why I Know the World Isn't Ending." Because a Taco Bell was open when the baby was ready to be born. Because a man found his wedding ring lost for 15 years while planting bamboo, because bamboo and laziness lead to longevity. Because she found a way to talk to elephants, because a whale created a rainbow, because 11 ducks could stop traffic, because someone taught the cat how to skateboard, because every shark has a name and a story, because a dog has met his match, and a nature lab has become a place for artists, because even a dead raccoon is given a vigil, because she lit birthday candles as she was dying, because a firefighter played the same numbers year after year, because he saved his life with a book and a song, because a girl nobody believed in herself, because a ballerina finally got what she came for, because they lived a life of quiet heroism, because no one could stop their success, because a woman wants to sing for strangers in Central Park, and the stage is more important than the screen, and a ukulele can bring fulfillment, and a salad can come from the sidewalk, and a garden cannot be contained, because puddle jumping is an educational necessity. And coloring books aren't only for kids, and the Salvation Army is open for another year, because even old libraries embrace their future and we never stop reading, because a self-portrait saves lives, and her son found her through a photograph, and the twins are reunited, and the high school sweethearts, because someone earned a ticker tape parade, and we still shake hands with politicians, because a graduate wasn't done dreaming, because we don't stop wishing, because we need only dirt and a vision, and not every job has shoes as a requirement, and humans evolve into heroes, because there are signals on top of Mount Fuji, and the drought is pinpricked by rain, and a dance saved a village, and they found their way through the woods, and because there was a windfall of bicycles, because they were capable of falling in love past 80, because the same card passed between them for 40 years, because they met again through writing, because Jimmy Carter knows something about Jesus, and a law changed at last in love's favor, because love has no labels, because love always wins, because repair begins somewhere, because he was innocent and they believed him, because truth and reconciliation heal wounds and a fire cannot destroy hope, because a flag came down when the votes came in, because someone remembered a single kindness, because there are stars that can only be seen in summer, because we reach the last page and we start again. I have a membership to it's like a word a day newsletter. It comes to my inbox, and I learn new words all the time. The title of this poem is a made-up word that came to me from my TurboTax tax specialist on a voicemail that she left me. It's called ecstatical. Ecstatical is what Linda called it on the voicemail she left to give me the good news. The math had seesawed in my favor because Linda, the full service tax specialist, had done something incredible. I could hear the delight in her message, a giddiness that took me back to the spelling tests from second grade and Mrs. Carlson's Ebullient script dancing across the pages. For nearly a week, I've been swimming in what Linda said, pointing my nose wherever the chances look slim, and seeing inside or beyond, where some pale fire is just kicking in, discovering its sea legs. All around, in fact, life seems to be crackling awake, or else it's been here this whole time, but needs the Lindas of the world to turn the tide, weave their fingers through the murk, and tell you it's going to be okay in words you could never have understood until now. And I thank you. And I'll just share one more. Really, it's a poem for you for being here and to thank you for coming. It's really important as a writer to be able to share, and it feels wonderful to be listening to the other writers. And so thank you for walking up 3 flights of stairs to get here. It's another short poem, 10-line. When we sat in a circle and told stories to each other. The first warm evening had come. The light was longer than yesterday. Arthur arrived with a fistful of poems and a hug. Amelia sidled in the way she always does, like a vapor traveling between continents. This time, she also brought twin cans of grapefruit-flavored hard seltzer, which she poured evenly between us. By then, we had transfigured the rows of folding chairs into a wheel and sat with our legs splayed into half-formed spokes. Naya was there. She said when her turn came just to listen, and she did. Bud, another first-timer, entered in a jacket and tie, which he loosened as soon as Della had finished. He had my father's beard and a voice gentle as dandelions. Robin's hands were so delicate. He said, "This is personal." It was a Tuesday. Our faces were turned toward each other. We could have been anywhere, but we were here. Thank you.
Thanks, Maya. Beautiful. I'm Mark Burrows. Delighted to see you here. And I'm going to start with a couple of poems. One is a poem about writing poetry. And it's one of the strange things that poets do. We're always trying to figure out why we do this and what we're doing when we do it. And I think it's really a self-reflective act of defending ourselves against people who think, what are you doing with your time, with that expensive education and all of that? Anyway, this is a poem that came to me. It started 40 years ago when I was in a fabulous museum in Munich on a junior year abroad program. And I found in the Alte Pinakothek this painting the Neue Pinakothek, a painting by a man named Karl Spitzweg, who was a sentimental painter from the late 19th century who painted these point scenes of everyday life. And the one that arrested me, that I loved, I fell in love with it, I memorized it in my mind, is a poem called The Old Poet. And it's an image that I'm going to describe in this poem, but it's so absurd and wonderful at the same time. And I thought that pretty much sums up my life, absurd and wonderful at the same time, that I thought I've got to make a poem out of this to try to understand who I am. It's called Different Ways to Dream, remembering a painting by Karl Spitzweg in the Neue Pinakothek, Munich. Are you a poet? The neighbor asks with blunt force. I stumble along in awkward silence, not knowing what to say. Then smile as I suddenly remember the painting of the poor poet I'd once seen. There, lying beneath blankets heaped in piles on his disheveled bed, this word-crazed dreamer seems hard at work, a feathered pen clenched between his teeth, while with upturned fingers, he seemed poised in the hunt for a fugitive word. His mind searching for a fitting image or phrase. Caught up in the weave of sound and sense, he hopes to coax into rhymed lines and rhythms. He's fixed an umbrella above his head against the rains that pierce the roof, while at his side, A pile of old books is close enough to grasp. Sunlight spills through an unopened window into the room where he sits, and a well-worn boot stands near the cold Kachelofen, like a soldier at attention, with crumpled sheets of paper stuffed into the oven's gaping mouth. Discarded drafts of poems, perhaps, waiting like love, to be changed into flame and song. Meanwhile, one of my cats saunters quietly into the room where I sit and muse, and sprawls herself out in my lap, reminding me of other languages of love and different ways to dream. And here's one that takes me back to the 4th grade, which was a musical high point in my life. I was given the choice to play an instrument in the band, and the band director said, well, we don't need anything but clarinets, so that's what you're going to play. I never really took to the clarinet, sadly, for my parents and brothers who had to listen to me playing for the years. I kept at it. But this is remembering something that happened in the 4th grade, and the poem came to me as poems sometimes do, layered with memories from different times in my life. The poem started when my children were in the 4th and 5th grade in elementary school in Massachusetts. And I went to listen to the spring concert. And the band was memorable, terribly memorable, or memorably terrible. And I was standing next to the father of twins who were both in the band, and he was the principal bass clarinetist of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. It's an endowed chair. And I always loved to go to see him there. That's my neighbor. I know him, right? But after we listened to this horrible music for about 10 or 15 minutes, I leaned over and said, Mark, his name was also Mark, what do you think? He looked at me with a smile and he said, well, we all have to begin somewhere. Elementary music. It was the 4th grade, and I knew it was the start of a musical career, proud of my shiny clarinet, rented against the likely chance that the gift might not take. After a few weeks, I was able to make squawking shrieks that no one would have thought to call music, sounding more like an animal in some terrible agony, with moments of metal grating on slate. And then it came. The day of our first concert. Our parents assembled on the hard wooden bleachers of the grade school gym, seeming undisturbed by it all, beaming with a pride not yet chastened by the noise that soon enough would be unleashed. The first piece began with a blast, and off we galloped, trying to translate into something like song what we could just make out of the notes neatly scribed on the page. And then it all fell apart as quickly as it had begun. And we sat in nervous silence before the director, who paid no heed to our boisterous failure, standing alert, ready, a look of pure anticipation on his face, signaling us to attention as he raised his plastic baton and then struck it several times against the music stand. And off we raced again, like hounds chasing their prey across soggy fields and out over stubborn, thorny hedges, making a sound that had never been heard before or since. And after a frolic of reckless joy, we all somehow sensed that it was time to stop. Our faces shining with the joy of those who'd found some lost or deeply hidden treasure, waiting for the applause we knew would surely come.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you to the other poets who've been reading here tonight. And to all of you for coming. I'm Meg Weston, and I am the co-founder and director of the Poets Corner, and also working with these other folks to plan the Camden Festival of Poetry, which is our very first one and is happening on May 20th. So I hope you all come to that. one of the things I'm not reading at the festival, so I am reading tonight, but I am running one of the mini workshop sessions we have planned. And the one I'm offering is called Poetry and Memoir, Family Narratives. And it will have examples and a really fun exercise that taps into that personal universe of language and expression and memory that's unique to each of us, like the one you just read, Mark. That's great. So I'm going to read a couple of narrative poems tonight. And the first one is inspired by a Bob Dylan song. Do you all know Subterranean Homesick Blues? So the first verse goes something like, Johnny's in the basement mixing up the medicine. I'm on the pavement thinking about the government. Man in a trench coat, badge out, laid off, says he has a bad cough, wants to get paid off. Look out, kid, it's something you did. Don't know when, but you're doing it again. You better duck down the alleyway looking for a new friend. Anyway, my poem is Subterranean Homesick Blues Revisited. And I'm going to dedicate it to my brother, who I think is listening online because he knows this story. Anyway. Wafts of English leather drift under my door. My brother Bob is in the living room. Dylan's on the stereo, loud. Johnny's in the basement, mixing up the medicine. I hear the bass voice of his friend Joe Lewis, tall, black, and handsome. I'm wide-eyed and tongue-tied when he stops to say hello. Look out, kid. Bob's dressed in striped bell-bottom jeans, long curling hair reaching his shoulders, the smell of liquor on his breath. They say they'll take mommy's new car, the one she begged daddy to let her buy, the MG Midget in British racing green that smells like fresh leather, the real English kind. I'll keep a lookout, hoping no one comes home and I'm asked where they've gone. Look out, kid. I hear the tune of Subterranean Homesick Blues years later when my mother writes in her letters, Daddy's on the wagon, eating just tomatoes. Bob was on the toilet shooting bags of heroin. Nancy's locked her bedroom door, eating hordes of candy corn. Aunt Ossie came to visit. We're playing tennis and drinking gin. I hum to myself, it's something you did, God knows when, but you're doing it again. You better run across the country looking for a new friend. Look out, kid. So that poem was in a chapbook of poems that I wrote called Letters from the White Queen, which were taken from excerpts of letters my mother had written to me my first year away from college, and she signed them all, the White Queen. So you get a sense that our family was maybe not 100% normal. But this next narrative poem is a little later on in my life, and it's going to be in this forthcoming book I've got coming out in September called Magma Intrusions. So if you know anything about me, I was not fascinated by dust bunnies as a child. I was fascinated by volcanoes, and I have been my entire life. So this poem is called Almost the Last Billboard in Maine, 1984. The Highway Beautification Act of '64, banning billboards on interstate highways, was the passionate wish of Lady Bird Johnson. And LBJ said to his aides, I love this woman, so you will see that we win. Maine law passed in '78, banning billboards from all roads. It took 6 years to enact. Almost the last billboard stood alone on Route 1, opposite the plant where I worked. Young, a vice president in a company that processed thousands of rolls of film for Laverdiers and Welby's and Rexall. Recently divorced, I'd begun to date. I called him the electrician, although his name was Bob. One morning I drove to the plant, crossed the highway. Next to an ad for Merit cigarettes appeared a new billboard, a hand-painted picture of a volcano. Crude, a lumpy black mountain, and above it a clump of gray cloud. Sides flowed with poster paint lava. Besides this, the words, "Imperspicuous never, love Bob." Everyone knew it was for me. Factory workers giggled. My boss called me into his office. "Who's Bob?" he went. The radio station picked it up. The whole town was talking. Who knows what imperspicuous means? Me, I knew. Our imperspicuous romance had begun on Route 1 towards Wells, where we stopped at a used bookstore. I bought a tattered book of old words and read to him while he drove. Imperspicuous, vague, uncertain, unclear. He said it described me to a T. Might be how I felt about him. His painting was the last volcanic eruption ever seen in Maine, on almost the last billboard for me. We're going to talk a little bit about the festival.
Yeah, we want to promote the festival. That's one of the reasons we're here with these wonderful poets. Meg and I and Catherine Seitz in 2019 met together. I was a newbie to Camden, and Meg had been here quite a few years. And we were talking about the idea of having a festival of poetry. It sounded like a marvelous idea, and then COVID hit, and it stopped a lot of marvelous ideas, including that one. And then about a year ago, we picked it up again.
Yep. Well, you started it, I think. And then we invited these other folks to join us in planning something that's really become quite an event.
I mean, part of it is Camden is such a marvelous community of people. And I'm looking around and I'm seeing poets who are here and lovers of poetry who are here. There are a lot of big cities where you couldn't get 40 people in a room who really were enthused by poetry. They're there, of course, they're there, but how do you get them to come together? But Camden has this remarkable civic character. And we knew that if we built it, they would come. If we planned a festival, there would be enough people here to make it an event in Camden, alongside the film festival, alongside Shakespeare in the Park, Bayside Bay Chamber, all kinds of things happening.
Yeah.
Right. So this is where it started. It's coming together on May 20th, and we'll tell you a little bit about it. In the morning, some of you have noticed probably over the last few years, but you don't know the genius behind this, a woman named Elfie Owen. Is Elfie here? No? Elfie started in 2019 Poetry on Windows in Camden, right? You all know it. And the first year, I think it was a minimal success. The second year, it was a huge success because we had nowhere to go. You couldn't go into any of the stores, but you could look at the windows. So I walked up and down the streets like many of you did, masked, keeping social distance, pausing to read the poem on the windows. And year by year, it's gotten bigger and better and more spectacular, I would say. This year, Elfie said, let's bring it together with the festival. So on Saturday morning, the 20th of May, from 10 o'clock till about 11:15, the poets whose poems are selected are going to be at their windows. And we're going to have a little parade through downtown Camden. So join us if you can, around 10 o'clock. She said we'll meet at the COH. I still don't, I asked her what is the COH in Camden? Camden. What is it?
Camden
Oh, Opera House. Thank you. Camden Opera House. Yeah, we'll meet at the Camden Opera House. Or you can just tell your friends COH. And then they'll know you're in. And then we come back again. These are all middle school students. And if you've read the poems over the years, they're quite spectacular in their own ways. So it'll be a chance for them to shine, for their families and friends to come. Are your kids writing a window? Should have.
Yeah.
So then we continue, get a lunch somewhere, go home for lunch at 1 o'clock, come back. We're gonna have a reading. John Paul is reading, Lucinda is reading, Maya is reading, and then 3 other poets are reading. And then we have workshops, mini workshops.
Starts at 1,
Starts at 1.
and
Yep.
it's at the First Congregational Church.
Yes. And the pastor's here. The head honcho. Yes. And in that first hour, we're also going to have a singer-songwriter duo performing. Share, because poetry happens in music, right? I was in Australia years ago giving a radio show, and the guy was sort of shocked that they had a poet invited. He said, you know, nobody does poetry anymore. I said, look, I've been listening to your radio show all morning. It was full of poems. No, there weren't any poems. I said, yeah, these were songs. People were singing poems. He'd never thought of it. Anyway, so 1 to 2:15, and then workshops, a whole bunch of them, a haiku workshop.
Actually, eco poetry.
Oh, sorry, eco poetry workshop. Your workshop. I'm going to do a workshop with the high school kids who are going to be honored that day. And one of them is receiving a significant prize as a poet of promise, yet to be determined.
And
Maya?
Maya's doing workshop.
Blackout poetry, so erasure poetry that's borrowed from existing writings.
Perfect. Wonderful. And a couple of others. And then we come for a big refreshment time. There's going to be a book fair with probably about 25 poets showing their books, sharing them with you if you want to buy them or just look at them or meet a poet and talk to them, shake their hand, scratch their back, whatever you want to do. Poets are easy. And then the highlight really is Richard Blanco, who is here in Camden to speak. And if you've never heard Richard Blanco, you've missed a huge gift. If you watched the second inauguration of Barack Obama, you've heard Richard Blanco. He gave a memorable poem. If you watched the inauguration of Janet Mills a few months ago, then you heard Richard Blanco.
And Richard also just got the National Endowment Humanities Medal from President Biden. And he's just a wonderful poet. John Paul and I have taken workshops with him, and he's a wonderful teacher as well as a great poet.
Yeah. So we hope you'll come on Saturday, the 20th, and bring your children, your parents, or grandparents, your friends, your neighbors. Yeah. And it'll be a wonderful day. Come for part of it, come for all of it. And we'll be happy to see you there. But in the meantime, we've been delighted to be hosted here by Julia. Thank you so much, Julia Sagather. She is a formidable force for culture and the arts right here in Camden. She's been the program director here at the library since the fall, and already has put together, many of you know this, a remarkable program of evening events, morning events here in the library and elsewhere around town. So we're so glad to have you here and on our side on the winning team. And thank you all for coming for this hour together. Thank all of you on Zoom, including my mom. Hi, Mom. Got to say that. And have a wonderful evening together. Thank you.